This Thrive Loud episode is brought to you by Hinge Consulting. Success on Amazon hinges on well-executed strategies. Contact Hinge Consulting to learn about total Amazon channel management and to see if your business has what it takes to grow over 300% over the next 12 months. That's Hinge Consulting at hingeconsulting.co.
Welcome back to another episode of the Very Serious Business Podcast. The show that explores the old ways of making money are the only ways. Today, we'll speak with Humperdinck Elderman, a man whose motto is, if you're happy in your field of work, then you're obviously not working hard enough.
Hold up. Humperdinck? Seriously? I don't think so. Welcome to 2018, people, the year where we strive to thrive each and every day. And don't use words like Humperdinck. Want to know how you can get started? You need to listen to the amazing episodes that Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond has to offer. Want to jumpstart your business? Thrive Loud. Looking to be inspired? Thrive Loud. Want to work smart and not hard? Thrive Loud. Drop kick the old stuffy way of doing things and get out there and change the world. Listen to Lou Diamond as he brings you the smartest leaders and most dynamic guests with the most energizing messages. Listen to Thrive Loud and you and your business will start thriving too.
Now I'm getting really excited. Okay, this is the part where I'm going to get loud.
Holy crap, here we go.
I like telling stories.
I learn best through experiences.
Everything I do is because of everything I did.
Talk about having maximum impact while having a ton of fun.
When you can net through that, what you do leave behind for your listener will have more impact.
Wow, bring it on.
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. Today on Thrive Loud, we bring you an award-winning branded content strategist, consultant, and speaker who travels the world teaching marketers and publishers how to tell better brand stories. Thrive Loud listeners, Melanie Deziel. Melanie, how are you today?
I'm pretty good. It's better now that I'm here.
I know it's that you're here and it's awesome. We just recently met at an NSA meeting in New York. And you have one heck of an interesting background and an interesting approach for where you're angling your message and what you're doing in the workplace. And I know the Thrive Loud listeners are going to love this conversation because we had a fun time the first time we chatted. So why don't you tell a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are now, and I will interject appropriately. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
I started out as a storyteller, and I'd like to think I'm still a storyteller. But I was really, really interested in how the world works and why things happen. And so I found myself in the world of journalism, where, every day, every story is a chance to learn and to become an expert in something. Unfortunately, that was right around the time that newsrooms around the country were downsizing. They were laying people off. They were switching to digital and struggling to make revenue. And so I had to figure out, how do I put this love of learning and storytelling to use in some sort of new context where, hopefully there's actually some money to be made. And that's how I ended up in the world of brand storytelling, where basically I help marketers act like journalists. I teach them how they can tell stories in a way that people actually want to keep turning the page or clicking next or follow through all the way to the end of a video by really tapping into the core of what makes stories compelling in the first place. And I started out at the Huffington Post and helped them build a team that does exactly that, helping brands tell stories on the Huffington Post. I was the first editor of brand content at the New York Times, where we built a team called T-Brand Studio with that same task to create New York Times quality brand storytelling that lives on the Times website. And then, I kind of realized that I was really good at teaching this to people, and I would quickly, if I'm doing a good job of teaching my colleagues how to do this stuff, then hopefully I'm out of a job at some point, right? They're learning and they're taking these things. And so I realized that, my message was probably a better fit for the lifestyle of a speaker and a consultant, where I could reach more people with my message and, hopefully help them all go back to whatever their day jobs may be and take those learnings to work.
So I tell a lot of stories, and I tell them when I speak, and I bring a lot of stories to the air on this podcast show. So give us some of the hints, if you would, or some of your key learnings that you've helped others understand on making that journalistic view of telling a story, how that's maybe different than maybe how other people are doing it.
Sure. I think most journalists, we don't wake up in the morning and decide what the story is going to be. You go out and you find a story or you discover a story. With marketing, it's kind of the opposite. We know from the outset exactly what we want people to believe, exactly what we're going to say, and hopefully the actions they're going to take. So sometimes it's really hard in a marketing context to step back and find those stories when you're way too focused on your objective. So the one thing I always encourage people to do is to look for people who can teach inside the organization, because our customers aren't super interested in our latest product or our pricing or, some internal fact about us. What we can do to provide them value and give them something they're interested in is teach them something. And every company, no matter what you do, every entrepreneur, every thought leader, you have expertise in something that might seem so basic and so boring to you that other people are fascinated by. And if you have any doubts about this, the entire concept of the show, how it's made, is going inside factories that no one ever thought they wanted to see the inside of and showing you how everyday products get made. And it's on it's like 700th season at this point. I mean, we're fascinated, right?
We love it.
That's something you could always do, is look for those people inside your organization or if you're a solopreneur, maybe that's you. What can you teach your audience? What can you show them? How can you give them the knowledge that you already have in a way that they didn't even know they needed it? Because if you demonstrate that you are someone who is intelligent and helpful and trustworthy, then when it comes time to buy something, they're going to be coming back to you because they already know, like, and trust you.
So when it comes to telling stories and understanding, I guess, let's talk about a little bit of what I love about great journalists is that they do a great job of providing a ton of really good facts. Mm-hmm. Give us how your style and some of the ways that you like to take really good facts that you need to get in there, because sometimes we can get overloaded by the data, and make it more appealing to listen to, because that is something that I know that a ton of companies get almost overwhelmed with, because they're so impressed with sharing the incredible achievements that they've done or the all this information that they have, and they might actually shove it down people's throat when they try to tell their stories, as opposed to do it in a way that's really digestible.
Yeah. So one of the first things they teach you in journalism school is show, don't tell. And marketers, we're really good at telling, right? We're good at telling people that we're great and that we have new products and all these things. But where we lack is that journalistic element, that showing, that making them feel something instead of just telling them to feel it. So I think this is best done with an example. I worked, if I wanted you to care, for example, that the American prison system is broken in a way that's kind of disproportionately impacting poor women and their families, I could give you a bunch of stats about how the number of women in prison has risen 8-fold in the last 3 decades, and it's rising higher than the rate of men. But those are just numbers, and you can't really relate to it. It would be far more effective for me to tell you the story of someone who was personally impacted. There's a woman named Rusty Miller Hill, who's from here in New York City. And when she was a young woman, she kind of got mixed up in the wrong crowd and ended up serving a 2-year sentence for a nonviolent drug-related offense. And while she was serving that 2-year sentence, her 2 children were put into foster care and adopted. And she hasn't seen her children in 20 years. Now, all of a sudden, right, there's something at stake. Like, we relate to people in a way that we can't relate to numbers or bar charts or something else. So you can find that human element and really show someone who is exemplifying that stat, who is impacted by that stat. It's just so much more impactful, and it has a much longer lasting impact on our audience than throwing all of our impressive numbers and studies at them.
So I've got a good question, and I thought about this before you were coming on the show, Melanie. Give us an example of a market or a brand story that's out there today, that they're doing a really good job in how they're telling a story, and give us one that you think that they could really improve.
Well, the one that I end up talking about a lot that I think is an example that a lot of people look to, and I'm lucky enough to have been able to work on this, is actually the story where I met Rusty, the woman I was just talking about. So Orange is the New Black, show on Netflix, women in prison, right? They came to us at the New York Times and said, we need people to care more about the topic of this show. People don't generally list prison life as something they're incredibly interested in, but we think they would be. And so our task was, how do we tell that story about why this is important in a way that our New York Times readers are going to like? So rather than just interviewing characters or actors or talking about plot lines, we actually went out and found real women who had been to prison or people who worked in prisons or prison reform workers, psychologists, sociologists. And we got them to tell us what it's like. What is it really like to be a woman in prison? What is it? What do you go through? What's the impact on your life? How do you pull yourself back together after something like that? And so in that way, we were able to tell a broader story that appealed to a lot more people and, did it in a way that was compelling. But that you ended that piece thinking, wow, I guess I do care about women in prison. I guess this does impact me. Maybe this is something I do want to kind of, put more of my time toward and learn more about. And obviously, the tone of that piece was somewhat different than the tone of the show, which tends to be a little more lighthearted and humorous. But, that was really our goal, was to say, how do we tell a more compelling story about this rather than this is a show about women in prison, you should watch it. We had to make people feel like they wanted to watch it instead of just telling them to. So that example, that was 2014. So it's a few years old, but we won a number of awards for that piece. And, it was one of the things that people still point to as an example of like when you back away from what you're trying to sell and think about what you want to make people feel, you're actually able to achieve the selling objective in a much more efficient way. So have you,
I was going to jump in now, and I agree with that, by the way. It's great work and congrats on that, which is a pretty cool thing to have. That's the OMA award, right? Or something like that.
It is, yeah.
All right. So read up. We'll put these links on the on the show notes so people know. Yeah. All right. So I definitely was pressing and I didn't care which way you went on this, but so flip that around. Something you've seen of late that you don't feel they're doing a good job telling that story.
This is a tough one for me because I never really like to throw anyone under the bus because I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, let's make some bad marketing today. It's not really anybody's goal. And the unfortunate reality is that there's as much bad marketing and bad, brand storytelling out there as there is regular journalism and blog posts and music and movies and food and the next thing. Right. I think as a general rule, when I see content that makes me cringe, it's the content that is so tone deaf to the audience, and is selling right off the bat. It's sort of asking before they've given anything of value. And so, if a lot of times you see these egregious like product placements. Oh, there's one I could throw someone under the bus because I don't.
Throw them under the bus. Come on, Melanie. Let's see.
I'm throwing them on in. If you have watched any episode of television in the last, year and a half, you've probably seen one of the most egregious
product
placement situations from the Microsoft Surface. Is this ringing any bells for you?
Yeah,
right?
keep going. Yeah.
It's on every show. And the reason that it just catches you off guard is because it's done in such an unnatural way where, they're forcing it into the situation. If someone were just using the product normally, fine, but they do this like slow grab and they happen to use every single feature and then they're pointing it out. Let me just check on my Microsoft Surface since it has this convenient touchscreen. You're like, God, no one would say that, even in real life. Never mind on those, So I think, and again, that's an instance of they're thinking we need to showcase the features. We need to really push the product, make sure there's a 3-second close up on the logo. Instead of thinking, how can we just do this in a natural way that demonstrates the value instead of having to really like push it over the edge? So yeah, that's probably the closest thing I could say.
One of the smoothest ways of ever product placement. I know product placement is a huge industry of all these products that are out there. Remember, this goes way back to when Seinfeld was like one of the top shows on TV. I mean, Jerry had a new type of box of cereal every single episode, but they never talked about the cereal. He always had it there. He was pouring it in, he was eating it, and the box is right in front of you. And it was common enough that you say, oh, look at that. He's got Special K. Oh, he's got Cheerios, whatever it might be. And they certainly got their run of the mill of making sure product placement. But you're right. It wasn't the focus. If you do that over in your face, no one, like you said, I love that show, don't tell. And it's such a powerful message on really making sure people connect, because you're trying to connect the story. You're not trying to force the product. I'm with you on that. It's something that you and I see eye to eye on.
And it's really something we should have gotten that signal, right? The advertising industry is in trouble with ad blocking and all of these things because we've been consistently putting out things that people don't want to see. So,
Right.
on some level, we should get that signal that it's time to give a little bit more value and be a little more cognizant of the fact that we're invading people's space, whether it's their small screen, their big screen, their TV screen. Like we are invading their personal space. And, we need to earn our place there and provide something of value if we want to be remembered.
Yeah, there is that fine line, by the way, and I have seen this, where sometimes the story is so good, but it trumps over the brand itself. And I know we're recording this leading up to the Super Bowl, which I always joke about because
Yes.
most of us watch the commercials before we watch the actual game or care more about them. And there have been times where an ad has been so unbelievably impressive, but you totally forgot what the product was.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I do understand that brand story, you've got 30 seconds and they're spending insane millions of dollars to cover it. They're just trying to catch your eye and hopefully they'll just, make the news the next day because the media will cover it.
Right.
But we've seen that, right? We've seen where people do something that's so overly dramatic and so focused on the story that it's still important to remember people that you want that brand recognition in whatever soft or correct way is there.
Yeah. And one of the things you can do is, I call it the pre-strategy, P, R, and E. So you have product focused stories. That's the P. And those are kind of the core. Like you said, you have to talk about your product. We need to know the flavors, the prices, the sizes, everything, right? That's key. The R is the role you play in your customer's life. And there's a lot of room for really rich storytelling there because that's your best opportunity to show, don't tell, the impact, the benefits, the ways that you can help people. And, again, it's not quite as product focused. It's a half step away. But it really demonstrates your value by showing the role you have in their life. And then the E, which is the last one, is the emotion focused content. So this may be the furthest from your product. But it's often the ones we remember most that kind of hit us right in the heart. So a good balance between those two things, I think those three things rather, is really important. If you have some product focused content when people are seeking it out to find the information they need, that's great. But balance that out with some content that demonstrates the role you play in their life and the emotions, that are tied to that role. You kind of have that great balance between showing them and telling them everything they need to know.
We're here with Melanie Deziel, who is by far the ultimate storyteller in helping to get your brand content strategy all together, and a great teacher and journalist in the way that you tell a story, and I love it. Let's spin a little bit the story to you, and obviously now you're marketing your own self, and you're speaking to many different audiences and getting this message out. What do you think is the big aha message that you deliver when you present? What's the one thing that comes out that everybody's like, oh, that nugget, I loved capturing that from her. I love that one piece that's out there. What's the thing that you see that you get the most reaction out of that people take to heart?
Absolutely. One of the things that I always say when I'm speaking and when I'm working with clients is that there is really no such thing as good content or bad content. There's only content in context. Right. So content is not in and of itself good or bad. It depends on the environment and where it's presented and the state of mind that our audience is in when they get it. So, a good meal is different after you haven't eaten all day, right? You'll eat anything at that point. It's not the same as when you're trying to plan for a big event like a wedding or a big date, then your definition of a good meal changes. So the same is true for our content. And I think when I share that with people, they start to realize that some of the standards they may have been setting for themselves or feeling like they needed to set for themselves don't necessarily apply in all of the contexts that they communicate with people. So, there really is a broad spectrum of content that can be interesting and valuable as long as you're aware of that context. And I think that surprises people most.
Melanie Deziel, who is your personal sensei? And I love asking this question because this is about when you have trouble thriving, who helps you get back on the thriving track?
I think there's probably a couple different ways to answer this question, but there is a spoken word poet named Anis Mojgani, and he has some fantastic videos on YouTube of some amazing poetry. And when I'm feeling down or I'm discouraged, he has a one called Invincible that just makes you feel invincible. And so, that is something that I turn to. And obviously spoken word poets have a lot to teach us about the way we use our voice on stage as speakers too. But his stuff is just incredible. And there are a lot of other great spoken word poets, Sekou Andrews being one of them, who really just light me up when I need it.
Anis, actually, I got to hear in person, and inspiring is an understatement. It's really great. It's really great, and how he connects his whole message, and very talented on top of all of that. So deliver that energy and that power is really good. So I get that.
Absolutely.
So what do you like to do for fun when you're not doing this amazing stuff that you help with all the companies? What's the fun thing that Melanie loves to do during the off season or during your downtime?
I'm not great at this question, and I always fail at this. And it's supposed to be the easiest one, right? My problem is that, like I said in the beginning, I really am very hungry for knowledge. And so what's a lot of fun to me is like watching documentaries and reading. And I love just grabbing coffee with people and hearing their story. I just feel like I'm a bit of a collector of stories and information. And so, I mean, that stuff is so fun to me. I think some people might think reading and documentaries might be work, but that to me is just, I'm in my bliss in that moment.
It's really interesting is Thrive Loud listeners, I've had the opportunity to hang out with Melanie in this. The first time I actually met her, we went out. There was a series of pretty A-type personalities in the room. Many of them have been Thrive Loud guests, and we'll name them. We had Phil Jones, myself, and even Sylvie DeGusto was there as well. And I noticed what a sponge Melanie is. And this is, I guess, that journalist in you, that ability to observe and pick out the details. You had an unbelievable ability to recollect specifics from conversations or to summarize things in a way that made it more intriguing. And I could see that that's like part of who you are. So even just observing all that content and documentaries and whatnot is more just filling that need to want to learn.
It is. Yeah. I just love listening and learning. And I know that's such a nerdy thing to say. I'm glad we've passed the point where we can make fun of people for that, right?
Absolutely. We're way past that point.
Excellent.
So give us all the plugs, the places where people can find you, social media, the like, and everything like that. So everyone can learn more about Melanie Deziel.
Absolutely. So you can find me online in most places as M Deziel. So that's MDEZIEL. That's my website URL. It's my Twitter name. It's just about everything. If you are really into brand storytelling like me, I've got a sweet newsletter that goes out every other week with great examples to learn from, recent news, and even open jobs in brand storytelling roles. So you can sign up for that at overlapleague.com. And that's named for everyone who works at that overlap between editorial storytelling and advertising. And if that's for you, then I would be glad to have you. But otherwise, find me on whatever social network suits your fancy. I'll be there.
All right. So I'm dying to ask this question because I have the previous show notes in front of me here, and I want to know what she's going to answer. So, Melanie Deziel, your all-time favorite movie?
Oh, you did this to me, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
I think I said I'm not good at this question. I don't know. Never know.
You're not. That's why I'm asking it, because I figured, I said, I got to push her a little bit and just put her on the spot. And I'll make a deal with you. You answer your favorite movie. It doesn't even, just whatever comes to mind, and I'll explain why I asked the question. How about that?
All right. Sure. At the moment, I can tell you there's one movie on Netflix, the Tony Robbins documentary, which is sort of like a full view of one of his really intense multi-day boot camp type events that he does. I think it's called I Am Not Your Guru. And I've watched that so many times. It's embarrassing. And it's made me cry almost as many times as I've watched it. Just a master of words, a master of the stage, and a master of empathy, of, understanding the person across from him. Really impressive. And so I never get sick of watching that.
All right. Well, I guess any one of us could take a good Tony. And by the way, I've been to one of those, and those are absolutely awe-inspiring and energetic as well. The reason I do ask the movie question is because it really does help connect the listeners to the guest, because movies are so unique onto themselves. And I always find that everybody gets a little bit out of a movie a little bit differently. We used to ask this question about books or whatnot, but it seems people don't have the time to read as much anymore. So movies do connect us. And there's always that fun component of movies. And specifically, I wanted to hear it from the ultimate storyteller, because movies are great stories and we love to hear them. And obviously, you probably have too many to choose from.
I was going to say, and then I went and chose a documentary about a fellow speaker, so I guess I delivered.
Exactly. But you also did a documentary, which is even more important because you're a journalist, and obviously bringing the facts to the news is something that is we all love. And I think documentaries are pretty impressive. So
definitely,
I'm a big fan. And I think the Thrive Loud listeners have slowly become a big fan of Melanie Deziel. So thank you so much for coming on Thrive Loud today.
Thank you for having me.
And we're just going to have to hang out more often, but probably this time without Phil. We don't need to hang out with him again. We'll just go. We'll grab other people.
Everyone else gets them. Everyone
he'll love it. he gets enough press as it is, so we just figured we'd throw him under the bus a little bit. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to all the Thrive Loud listeners out there, until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.